This is so exciting. I have to just say, I'm going to get my fangirling out of the way just for a minute over you because when they
Oh
first
no,
approached
no, no, no.
me, I know I've read every one of your books, the ones under Sophie Kinsella and then the ones under Madeline Wickham, and I'm just so honored to be here with you. And I just read Finding Audrey and I loved it.
Oh,
And
you are so kind. Well, can I now do my fangirling? Because I feel very much the new girl on the block speaking to the very wise and experienced hand. And I have to say, I love your books. I have not read The Moon and More, which I am going to start like any minute now, but I have just so enjoyed them. And you write with such, can I say with such pain, like you understand pain and your
oh,
characters go through such pain, but they kind of come out of it. And I think that's just such a rare skill that you seem to empathize with people, characters going through some really big stuff. And I mean, I suppose my question for you is kind of, do you get exhausted by these emotional roller coasters that your characters go through and these huge issues like, I don't know, pregnancy or drunk driving or whatever it may be? This is some anorexia, you know, I mean, it's just a big boom, another
right.
thing. So how do
I
you
think
find that?
it is. I mean, you know that whenever you finish a book, you feel exhausted, or I do. I am for YA. I'm not seen as being super prolific because I only have a book come out every 2 years rather than like every year. But I just couldn't do that
That
because
seems
it does
like good
take.
doing to
I
me.
know it takes a lot out of you. But then there are people who can do like 2 books a year. You know, but I think it just depends on your own
I think they
speed.
write very, very short books.
I think.
And I think they repeat their words.
I
I
don't. I
think
think
you'll
it's just
find.
there's no one way to do it, and that's when. Whenever I'm doing events and people say, you know, well, how do you write a book? What do you do? I'm like, it's different for everybody, and you have to figure out what works for you and then just stick with that and not be swayed. And my question for you
Yeah.
is someone who I've only written YA, and I would love to write contemporary fiction, but I just haven't been able to make that jump. What made you decide to write YA? And it seems so effortless to you to go from, you know, the shopaholic voice, Becky's voice, to Audrey's voice. And I'm just curious, was it something you had to think about, or did it just come naturally?
Um, I think, to be honest, it just came. You know, the characters came first, so I
Right,
didn't sit down and sort of make some strategic decision like, oh, now I'm going to write YA. I just, you know, I write always what I see around me.
right,
So when I see people shopping, I write about people shopping, and you know, so it goes.
right.
And I now live in a world with a lot of teenagers. I have 2 teenage sons,
Hmm.
and so I see their world, I see their issues, and it's just fascinating. And I think that I just saw some stuff that I wanted to write about, and having decided that, I mean, I could have actually written the story of Finding Audrey really as an adult book, just one of
Mhm.
those multi-generational adult books,
Right,
really.
right,
But having started it, I really wanted to actually make it a teenage book about teenagers for teenagers, because I
right.
just thought this will just speak to them directly. And I think, I don't know how you write your characters. Try to sort of channel my memories of being a teenager
Right.
and that kind of perspective, and then I kind of used the fact that I live with teenagers and
Right.
I see the way they talk and their witty banter, and they're so sharp, and I mean they're hilarious, and I sort of just tried to kind of channel that without obviously, you know, wholesale putting my children in, but
Right.
I do live in a house with a lot of children, and so I kind of think that I feel like I've been embedded in the teenage world like some
Right.
journalist, you know.
Like in a war zone.
Yeah, in the war zone. I've been in the war zone, and you know, I think I've been learning without realizing it, and so that just went into the book.
Well, it really makes sense to me that you have teenage sons because I thought that the brother character of Frank was so well done and so spot on. And I always worry as someone who does not have, I have a daughter, and people always ask me, you know, when are you going to write from a boy's point of view? And I always think, gosh, all through high school and even now, all I did was wonder what boys were thinking. Like, I think it's very hard to get into a
Do you know,
boy's
I've
head
had
and
that
to,
as well, and I think right now I don't think I have the confidence to write an
right.
entire book first person. I mean, the thing is also, I mean, I used to write a lot in third person, and I
Mhm.
think I did have some characters, and I would write from their perspective, third person. I did. I mean, and nobody ever said, "Oh, that's not how a man would think." It
Right,
was
right.
fine. Somehow, using a first person voice, and trying to write a man, I'm not sure I would have the confidence.
Yeah, and I have so much
that.
admiration for people. Laurie Halse Anderson had a book called Twisted that was a boy's point of view, and then of course The Fault in Our Stars, where John Green. I mean, and some people just make it look easy, but like I said, I always say in high school, that's all we talked about, me and my girlfriends, when we got together, is like, what does that mean? You know, what this book said to me.
I'm still doing this.
I know.
Analyzing texts.
I know.
What did it mean? Well, how many kisses? Well, would he normally put a kiss? Well,
right. Exactly.
It's
so I just think
mystery.
you write what you know, and for me, I think there's some pressure in a YA right now to, you know, write about things and things that are more topical in the world, and, you know, when are you going to write a book about this or this, you know? And I find that whenever I'm not writing about something I have some personal experience with, it just doesn't ring as true. But it's that balance between. Yeah, I'm worried that, you know, I'm on. This is going to be my 13th book, whatever book I publish next, and that's a lot of books. And how do you like not repeat yourself is my concern. Like, how do you continue to come up with fresh ideas and not sort of be treading, especially when you're doing a series like you were doing with The Shopaholic. I never felt like those books repeated themselves at all, but it must be hard.
That's very kind. I mean, I think that you evolve as a person, and I think you just naturally, I'll tell you what it reminds me of is, like, I have 5 children, so I have had 5 sort of, what are we going to call the baby?
Right.
You know, conversations. And when I look back at the names that I would have thought of, you know, all the years ago when I had my first child, they're completely different from names that I would have thought of by the time I had the 5th. Right. And I think that you move on. And the same with book ideas. I sometimes look back at ideas I had, you know, years ago, and I think, really? Right. And I think you just sort of grow. I mean, with Becky, I just feel like she goes through stages. She has a different take on life in each book, and it just has to feel quite organic. And I totally agree with you about the kind of like randomly choosing a topic and let's write about that. And, you know, you sometimes see it in these very well-researched books about, you know, the knife industry or something.
Right.
And clearly they've been to a factory and they know what they're, you know, but it's just too much. And you're like, okay, well done. You can write a thesis on this subject. That's great. But like you say, unless it kind of means something, you know, it's just a bit kind of random.
Yeah, and I went through that years ago. My first book came out in '96, so I'm coming up on 20 years next year. And there was a period where everyone was writing issue books, they called it. So it was like, I wrote a book called Dreamland, and there was a girl in it that got into an abusive relationship, and everyone's like, oh, this is your issue book. This is your issue book. And I was like, I didn't like plug in these holes and check these boxes saying, okay, I need an issue. Here's my issue. And then here's, you know, it's like the story started with Caitlin. It was her voice, and she just told the story. And I think that's the way that I work. But again, everybody has their own method, and I mean, that's what makes it so good, you know.
It sounds like you just kind of feel your way into it, and that's definitely the same as me. I kind of feel my way into characters, and it's like I start to just hear their voice, and kind of just sort of channel them / kind of be them, but I think that, you know, if you're kind of a perceptive, you know, empathetic person, which clearly you are, and I think all writers are sort of quite perceptive, you pick up on issues kind of naturally because they're in the world and you see them, rather than just sort of swivel-eyed and find an issue.
Right.
And that way is going to be so much more natural. I think we're almost twins in this, because my first book came out in 1995.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, so we've been.
I know. I went from feeling like this has happened to me in the last few years. I thought I was still like this up and coming, hot young thing, and then I realized I was actually like an elder statesman that was, you know, one foot out in the pasture. I was like, oh wait, you know, like. But
I have totally had that.
The market changed so much. You know, like when my first book came out, there was no Harry Potter, there was no Twilight. All the YA books were still shelved in the section with the board books, so it was like my book and Paddington and Goodnight Moon, you know. And then they finally realized that teenagers don't want to go to that section to buy their books, and so now there's a whole other section, and it's usually very far away from the children's section. So it's all these changes, you know. And I think you were on the forefront of, I hate this term of chick lit, but of like this new wave of women's fiction.
Yeah.
And you must have seen a lot change, because I think those were the first books that I was reading, and then there were so many imitators after you. Like, how do you stay original? Like you said, I guess you have to evolve, but
do you know,
must be a good problem to have that people are imitating you, but there were so many people trying to be you in those years, I feel like.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I just, for me, it just comes down to story, character, page turn, jokes, and I try not to think about, well, who else is out there and what are they doing? And I think, the more you do it, the more perspective you get. We had the whole wave of like all the sexy books after 50 Great Shades. I don't know what it was like in the States, but you could not walk into the bookstore without the whole wall was basically 50 Shades and similar.
Right.
And then they all kind of went. And then there's another thing. And I sort of feel like, you can't be swayed by what's cool or the latest thing. You just have to come down to, and the way I've always written, I don't know kind of what your guiding principle is, but mine has always been, write the book that you would love to read yourself.
Right, exactly.
Like, imagine you go into the bookshop and you see this book, you're like, oh yes, this is what I want to read, which happens to me all the time. I'll go in not really knowing what I want to read, and I'll see something, and whether it's the title or the premise or something, I'll be, obviously I'm going to buy this.
Yeah. And I think that's true. And I think years ago somebody asked me, like, well, who are these characters talking to when they're telling this story? And I was like, me, because it's all about me. It's like it's like they're telling me the story. I am the person, and I'm writing it down. I mean, I think it's real. I feel like I should look at these questions. I don't want people to think that I'm not asking you these questions people want, but I mean, I could just sit here and pick your brain for like 5 million years.
Well,
yeah. Okay, here's a good one for you. Did you find that this is from Marcos, did you find that you did anything different when writing Finding Audrey as compared to writing your adult novels?
Okay, that is a good question. I think that the book is slightly shorter than my adult novels, and I got advice on that. Once I decided I was going to write for YA, I sort of said to my agent, what should a YA book be like? And I read some YA books, and I sort of, and obviously the voice is different, it's younger, and the perspective is different. But in terms of actually crafting a story, writing scenes, no. I mean, I just think a good story is a good story.
Exactly.
Actually, the only tangible thing I did differently was ask my teenage sons about gaming, because it's a big gaming storyline.
Right.
And I was like, okay, so what are the exact Russian swear words that you use? They were very helpful, actually, on this. So that was nice. But I didn't try to modify the way I write. I just told the story, and tried to make it sort of appropriate for that readership. But I mean, I really think it's a book for all ages, really, as I think yours are as well. They're stories, and they have families in them, and they have worlds, and actually anybody could read them and love them. So,
and I appreciate that, because I think as someone who is coming from the YA world, obviously YA has been very popular in the last few years, and so we see a lot of people crossing over. And, some people do not approach it the way that you do. They're just like, oh, well, I'm writing for teenagers, so I just plug a teenager into the main character, and there you go. But it was very clear that you knew teenagers, and that you were working towards the voice and, getting it in your head, and also that you were just writing a good book. Like, I mean, I think I fell into young adult completely backwards. Like, I wrote a book.
So how did you?
Yeah,
how did you decide?
With a 15-year-old narrator. I had written 2 books that were just contemporary, which nobody liked. And then I wrote a book with a 15-year-old narrator, and the agent that I was querying to, I had actually sent her another book that was not YA, and she said, well, send us this other book you're working on. And I was like, oh, it's not good. And she was like, just send it. And I sent it, and they're like, this is YA. And at this point in 1995, YA was still like so small, and I was like, no, I'm a serious writer, because I just come out of the college program. I was like, I'm dark and depressing and heavy, And they were like, just trust us. And they sold it to a children's book publisher.
Such a great story.
Within a month. So I knew nothing. All I knew was that I had loved these books when I was a teenager. But I think it was the best way to come in, because if you go to a bookstore or a library now, there's so many books. How to write for teenagers. Like, learn their jargon and watch MTV. And
I'm so glad I didn't know that.
See, and you didn't. You would just said, I'm going to write a book, and I'm going to have a teenage narrator, which is exactly what I did. And I think that you just want to write a good book. You're not really thinking about the labels. Let the marketing people deal with the labels.
I so agree. I hate that whole stuff. I'm like, this is my story, and actually I've really felt that when I finished Finding Audrey. I was like, I've done this. It's a book. Do with it what you will. And I didn't know what age it should be. Which age is it appropriate for? Is it 12? Is it 14? Is it what? All these things. I thought other people will be the expert.
They are, and they're very good. I mean, librarians are fabulous at finding. I mean, that's the differences with like teenagers and middle grade and stuff. The librarians are so influential, and I'm not saying that just to kiss up to librarians, but I mean, they are the ones that gets the books in the hands. But if I ever have a question when people are like, well, is this why? Is this? I'm always like, ask a librarian, don't ask me. I'm just writing my book. So. Yeah,
I've learned that actually just coming into this world that the libraries are such a huge, and the teachers and I suppose you just have this extra layer. So when you're writing for adults just go and buy books. That's it.
Right.
You might get a recommendation from a friend, and actually rather lovely that a lot of my books do. People come to a signing and they'll say, oh, my friend, my mother. But generally you make your own choices. Whereas when you're a teen or a child, you've got this extra layer of advice and so, which is rather lovely because people can, really influence readership.
And what else is very cool about teenagers as readers is that they are so enthusiastic because they have not become, I don't want to say jaded, but adult readers, they've read a lot of books, and if you really love a book, you're like, oh, this was really good, you should read it, and you recommend it to your friends. But teenagers like burst into tears at the signing and go on, online reviews on Goodreads and say, oh my God, with like 10 exclamation points, and get things tattooed on their bodies from my books. It's so passionate because and I so remember that when I was in high school and feeling very lost and like nobody understood me, that I could find something in a book, that moment of connecting, like I'm not the only one who feels this way. Somebody else has felt this way besides me. It's great. And I think it's for a lot of us who write YA, it's like we're spoiled by it and we don't want to go into other markets because we're so used to this kind of passionate readership.
I would be very happy if I were you writing these books with these lovely readers who tattoo things. I mean, I must say, I've never heard of that. That's devotion.
It's crazy. That is a level that I still have. I'm like, wow. I don't have any tattoos. My husband has lots of tattoos, but I have none. I have a C-section scar, is what I always say.
Does your husband have tattoos from your book? This is what we need to know.
No. He's got probably like 20 tattoos, and none of them are my name at all. Which is not. He's just not. That's not the way that he rolls. He has a lot of Japanese art and tribal stuff and everything.
Okay, so you need to find like really quite a substantial quote, and you need to say to him, if you really loved me, you would have this all the way down your arm.
Right.
I'm not.
I don't think he'd do it. I really don't. He's just
a situation here,
but it's pretty intense. I have to say that's one of the coolest things that I've seen over the course of the years. But okay, I'm going to look at another one of these questions. Okay,
yes, let's be good.
So people want to know, what is your writing? This is Kathy Dunn asked this, and also a girl named Tara. What is your writing schedule like? Because I'm always interested in that too. Like your writing space.
Everyone's different.
Yeah, everyone's different.
Okay, I'll go first. So I have two different stages. Well, I have many different stages, but there's definitely a stage where I'm thinking about the book, and I often go and sit in coffee shops, and I scribble. I now take my laptop. It always used to be a notebook and pen. Now I sometimes take notes on a thing, and I do not sit staring at my computer because it's deathly. At that stage for me, I need to be out and about and walking and kind of keeping my brain alive. And then when I'm actually ready to write, first thing in the morning is the best time for me. Music very loud, type away, 1,000 words a day, just keep doing that, repeat.
Right.
That's
repeat and rinse. Yeah, that's so interesting.
How about you?
I write in the afternoons, but that's because when I first started writing, seriously after college, I had a job in the morning where I was an assistant to a local writer, and then I was a waitress in the evenings, so the only stretch I had was kind of after lunch. And so I trained my brain that I wrote from about 3 to 5 or 3 to 4:30. So I've just sort of taught myself, and that's when I write. And when I'm not, like I took a long break between books after I finished Saying Anything. I usually will start a book that fails. I would usually have at least one failed book between every book that works. And I decided to try not to do that this time and just take a break.
Very wise. Yeah.
Yes, but I mean, I have a picture of 13 abandoned manuscripts that I found in my attic.
Do you know
over the
what I'm going
course
to
of.
say? I'm going to go out on a limb. I bet you there is some really great stuff there. I
Well,
bet you.
some of them morphed into other things. Some of them I never even finished. Some of them I sent to my agent, and she said, "No, this is not your next book." And it was just
That
this
is your next but
panic.
one book.
Right. Yeah. But it was the panic. It was this sense of I should be writing. I'm a writer. I should be writing. And what I've learned that works for me is if I take that time off and, like you said, just kind of walk around and be out in the world and not think about writing, if something bubbles up, that's usually a keeper. And then I start working and I try to write every day. But I think it's interesting with the music. So many people write with music. I can't have any noise. Like, I live out in the country. And I used to face a wall before we moved out here, and then my husband gave me windows, and I was like, I'm going to be too distracted by the windows. But I'm not, because there's not much happening out here except a deer, wandering by. But I only do a little bit a day. Do you do like all day, or do you do like chunks?
No, it's too tiring. I will keep going until I've done 1,000 words. Okay. That's my I'm done. Yeah. And then I get a bit obsessive. So I'll sort of, stop in the afternoon and then see to the children and, sort of have a bit of life. And then I will kind of often creep back to it in the evening and start changing a sentence sort of 2,700 times, changing a word. But so, and actually then I have to sort of say, no, stop being so obsessive, because that I edit and edit and edit. I go back, I rework scenes, and I'm a real believer in that you need perspective. Right. So you have to have time away, and then you have to come back. Yeah, you do. And you have to know when to walk away, I think, is because what happens with me is I'll just keep trying to fix it, and it just goes nowhere. And then, you go away and you go grocery shopping, and you're in the produce section, and it's like, oh, that's what I need to do, all the time. All the time. And people are always like, well, how do you do it? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, some days are hard. Some days are great. I try to write every day if I can when I'm working on something. It was a little bit harder when I had my daughter. Now there's childcare, if the babysitter doesn't show up or whatever. But I do better working every day for a little bit of time. I'm just sort of plugging away at it rather than these long. At the end of a book, I will often write for a few hours on end. If it's kind of like that roller coaster, like up at the top and then you just race to the bottom, that's when I'll do a few hours in a row. But otherwise, it's just my little hour and a half to 2 hours a day, and that's all I can manage. That is so impressive. That is so impressive. I wish I could do that. Oh, I'm now going to dream of that. There's just everybody's different. Everybody's different, and and I was terrified. Like, I haven't written anything in a while, and I'm like, when you're on Twitter and everybody's like, #am writing. I'm like, I'm not writing. I'm just sitting here watching Broadchurch, or staring out the window, or, like eating chocolate and obsessing about something else in my life, So I got to get back to work, really. No, but it all goes in. It does. It's all going in somewhere. Yeah. All right, I'm going to look at another question. This is one's sort of at the top. Okay. Social media has definitely grown up and evolved since you both started your writing careers. True. Yeah. What is your feeling about social media, and how do you think it has changed the way you connect with fans? I think it's lovely, I must say. I think it's lovely. It's very immediate. I have noticed that it's kind of almost taken the place of letters for me. Right. For me, Twitter is now where people go, and I don't get as many letters because people will I still do get letters, but I think not as many, but more Twitter. But what's lovely is it's just so immediate and so easy. So I think it's great. You are a big online presence. I am, and it's not just because of market. It's because I like it. It's sort of an obsession. I really like Twitter. I just think and for me, it's like a way of sharing my life or my writing without having to wait 2 years between books. I started with a blog. I had a blog on LiveJournal years ago. And I did that, 7 days a week, and then I dropped it to 5, and then 3, and then I was like, this is just too much writing, But it was nice to be able to connect with the fans that way and sort of write about other things other than, my novels and my narrators and stuff. Yeah, but I love the connection, and that's where that's where the teens are, but a lot of teenagers are not on Twitter. They're more on Instagram and Tumblr and stuff, but I just think it's fun. I enjoy it, and I like hearing from people. I love hearing that people are connecting. Yeah. Yeah. And it's a kind of way as well that people from other countries are all kind of connected
Right.
you know, which you don't get if you go on tour to a particular country. You see people in that country, and then you see people in another country or in a city. But this way, everybody is kind of linked, and I think there's something really lovely about that, because actually, having travelled a lot and met a lot of readers, I do think that, and I'm sure you have the same, that my readers seem to kind of share something. They all have a sense of humour, and they're good-natured, and I mean, everyone says, "Oh, you have such nice readers." I'm very proud of my readers. I
am too. I'm like, I have the best readers. I will
well, we probably share our readers. They overlap. This is what it is. They are very nice, and it's lovely to think that they can all kind of connect beyond kind of a few people are reading here and there. But there's a bigger kind of, like a club it's just a lovely thing.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing for me with social media is stepping away from it so I can work. Like when I start writing, I never want to write. I always tell people this. I never want to write. I never want to exercise. I never want to go to yoga. And I make myself do all of these things. But, I give myself like 15 minutes to just sort of futz around on the computer, and I'll be on Twitter and everything. But I can't have any internet on when I'm writing. And I have to turn off my email notifications. I mean, it's very easy to fritter the whole day away on social media.
It is.
You have to just find a way to turn it off, And that's the challenge for me. And to not let it get in my head. I don't tweet about what I'm working on, and sometimes people get frustrated by that. They're like, you never tell us about the writing process or how things are going. And I don't tell anybody anything when I'm writing.
No.
And that's from my college workshop experience. When the first book I wrote, everyone was shredding it in workshop, every day. And I was like, I don't want anyone to know. So nobody knows what I'm working on, not even my husband. I don't talk about it. And then when I finish, I send it to my agent, and she's the first person that reads it.
Is she?
So it's like this nice, wonderful secret.
Completely on your own the whole way through.
Yeah, which can be both good and bad. It's like you have that independence, and nobody is in your ear, but it's also terrifying because it's just you to fix it if the boat is sinking.
Yeah. Well, I'm very similar. I couldn't share anything. I'm so cagey. My agent always has no idea what I'm up to.
Right.
But I do share everything with my husband. And so he's my sounding board. And if I get stuck, as we all do, we'll go out and we'll order lots of cocktails, and that's the problem. I find them very helpful. Little recommended facet of the writing process.
Yes.
They don't seem to measure on that in the creative writing studios, but I find it's number one.
It's very helpful. I'm with you.
And actually, I do find that helpful. I mean, I think I then talk at him and sort of work it out, for myself. But I just find it very helpful that he's there.
Right. Yeah. And I have to say, going back to the social media aspect, not just the fans, but I don't know how much you're aware of this, but there is an incredible network of young adult authors, and we are all on Twitter together. And it's sort of like my water cooler, since I'm self-employed and I sit here in this room and write by myself and kind of are all in my own head. But I can go on Twitter and be like, I am having the worst writing day today, and someone will immediately hit me back and say, me too. It's okay. Just hang in there. It'll be better tomorrow.
So nice.
Yeah. It's a really nice community.
I have a similar thing that actually I've had, it must be at least 10 years now. There's just a group of writers, and we were all in an anthology, and we met at the launch party in London, and somebody had a very tech-savvy husband, and he set us up this discussion chat room. And we've been chatting for years and years and years. There's about 15 of us.
Wow.
And like you say, it's the water cooler. It's the lifeline.
Yeah.
And nobody else understands what it's like to be a novelist.
Yeah. And they can't. It's like you have a weird job, and like there are writers around here, but there's nobody that's writing YA. And when I meet people at conferences and stuff, that's one thing. But I live in North Carolina. A lot of writers live in New York and in Brooklyn, or they live in LA, but I love where I live, and I don't think I could live around a lot of writers. I think it would make me into a nervous wreck, So this works great for me. I have my writer friends. I see them at conferences and at things, but we are always tweeting each other, and it's a support, because a lot of people just don't. I mean, our jobs are, like I said, my husband's a contractor and a carpenter. He builds houses, so it's very hard for me to be like, my job is so hard when he's been on the roof all day, and he comes home and he's like, yeah, your job's really hard. But there are certain people that understand when you're stuck or you're just having a bad day, and it's like everybody needs somebody to kind of vent to that gets it about your job.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
I'm with you.
all right, I'm going to look at another. Let's see. I'm trying to see what else is on here. I feel bad that let's see. Okay, for Sophie, big fan of your work. Are you planning to write any more young adult books?
Oh, good question. I have to say I've loved this whole experience. I loved writing the book. It wasn't in any grand plan. It just kind of came to me. And actually, I was supposed to be writing a completely other book, and I kind of dropped that. Said, right, I'm writing this one. This is so much fun. I'm doing this. So it kind of got jammed into my schedule, and I'm now back writing, my adult books, and I'm under contract, and so, but it's been wonderful. And I do sort of ideas come to me, and very sweetly people have sort of said, oh, we'd like to see another one. So it is definitely something which I would love to do, and it's just a matter of what, when, and also I'm a real believer in, don't write a book just because people say, oh, write another book. Write the book that you were desperate to write. That's, And so I'm going to wait until I have exactly the right idea that I am so excited about, and then I'm sure I will do it again. But I don't know exactly when.
Yeah.
What about you? Adult books? That's
I would love to. I would love to, but every idea that comes to me is usually a teenager. I think the closest I'm going to get is that I may age up a little bit, like college age. I feel like that, like maybe just the first summer after college, which would be like 18, 19. So it's still right on that barrier of, it's young adult, but it could also be, I could write about something like the first year of college. That's kind of intriguing to me.
That would be fun.
Yeah, just to be doing something not set in that actual high school. So that's intriguing to me. But, again, the idea has to be organic. It has to come, and you have to feel really good about it. And I can tell the total difference between a book that I'm really excited to write and one that I'm like, oh, this is the next book I should write. And then I sit down to do it, and I'm like, oh, no. So, I don't have as much control over it. I wish I did. I wish it was like a faucet and I could just turn it on and off. But that's
no, exactly. Well, I had to come back because I actually interrupted my Shopaholic series to write Finding Audrey, but I had left this story sort of on the brink of a new. I wrote Shopaholic to the stars with sort of definitely a carry-on to a new book, which then I sort of, and then I wrote Finding Audrey, and then I was like, but I have to carry on the Becky story. So now I wrote Shopaholic to the Rescue, which is the next one, and that's coming out. But that was a book I absolutely had to write. Right. Absolutely. The story was there. The readers were like, well, what happens next? And so that was just a joy to come back to.
And Becky is such a beloved character.
Sorry?
Becky is such a beloved character. I can imagine that people have, I haven't done series and I get asked about it a lot, but I think people get very invested, and they really want to know what happens next.
Have you thought of doing a series? I mean, is this something that you would...
I don't know. I'm worried that I'm just not a sequel girl. Usually by the time I finish my book, I am so sick of my characters, and they are so sick of me, and we're all ready to just move on and do something different. So I don't see it, but never say never is the way that I think. There's so many good YA sequels. I feel like people should just enjoy the ones that are out there and leave it to people who are really good at it, which I fear that I would not be.
I think when it's right, you'll know.
Right.
I think with all these things, when it's right, you'll know. Now, I have a question which has popped up. Right. Sent by the magic of the internet. Sarah, what would you tell your teen fans who may not have read Sophie's adult books of yet? Oh, this seems to be about my books. This is all wrong.
No,
but anyway, of yet, and are just being introduced to Finding Audrey now. This is
I would say that. First of all, Finding Audrey is a great book, and what I said on Twitter the other day, and a lot of people agreed with me, it's such a good depiction of teenage anxiety, of panic attacks, of not giving away too much of the book, but this is a girl that's been through something traumatic, and she has sort of shut down as a result of it. So I think, definitely you should read Finding Audrey just as a standalone book about a girl that is dealing with, coming back from a bad place. But also, you're in for such a treat if you haven't read any of the others. I mean, it's like, that is my favorite thing in the world. When I find a writer And then I read one book and I'm like, this book is so good. And then I see they have like 10 more. I mean, you could just spend the whole year reading Sophie Kinsella books and be completely happy. You know, like it's just, they're so fun. I mean, I just
that on the front of my books.
Yeah. they're fun and they're great. And Becky in particular is just this totally lovable character. And she really, like, if you want to see who was the original, like, writing these kind of books that then everybody tried to jump on the bandwagon and write the same kind, then this is the way to go. So, but I was thrilled that you came to YA.
Well, you are so nice.
I feel like we're lucky to have you.
It's been a very welcoming world. I have to say, it's a very different world from adult.
Yeah.
And, it's got different book fairs and meeting different authors, and it's just been a wonderful experience. And I have another question. They're now popping up on my screen. I'm so excited. So, Sarah, Deanna Schwartz loves your work.
Oh, nice.
So, Deanna, good choice. Very good taste. What was your hardest book to write?
Oh, my goodness. The hardest book to write. Well, they're all hard to an extent. I'm sure you can agree with this.
Yes.
Some are definitely harder than others. I think Just Listen was one of the hardest books that I ever wrote, and it's also one of the best books I've ever written, I think, in my opinion. It was the first of my books to make the bestseller list. It was my 7th book. It was really hard. It was one of those things where you're just grateful that you have friends that are writers, because when people would ask me, how's the writing going? And I've realized, like, people who are not writers, when they ask you that, they don't really want to know. It's like asking your dentist how the tooth business is. It's like, oh, it's good. But they don't want to hear, like, the specific details. But I remember when I was writing Just Listen, some poor person who was not a writer came to me and said, how's the writing going? And I was like, I feel like I am underground having to dig a tunnel forward, and all I have is like a little tiny baby spoon, and I'm just like scratching away trying to get to the light, and they just looked at me like I was a psychotic maniac. When I say that to my writer friends, they're like, oh yeah, spoon in the hole. I know exactly what you're talking about.
I totally, yeah. But satisfying when you get there.
When you get there and you're done. And then people react so nicely to it. Just Listen's been, people, that's the one that I see people tattoo on themselves all the time. So maybe that's why it was so hard. But
well, it came out of a real place.
Yes, it did.
The hardest thing is when you're drawing out of yourself,
right,
and putting it on paper.
Yeah, I think Just Listen and The Truth About Forever were the 2 hardest, and they are probably the 2 most popular, I would think. Although it depends, everybody's different on what resonates with them. But those 2 were pretty brutal, I have to say. But I'm proud of them. I never go back and read my books. I don't know if you ever do that, but I can't. All I see are what I would do differently now and things I would change.
Yeah. I like to, I've had to, so I'll tell you what's funny is because the books come out in different times in different countries, and then all my Madeline Wickham ones were re-released. I had to sort of re-familiarize myself with them to do publicity. And of course you're like, really? And then I have to think, no, I wrote that then, just leave that where it is.
Right.
Of course you wouldn't do the same thing now. But it's like looking at a picture of yourself in, dated clothes they were of their time. It's a book of its time. And I think you just have to think, well done me. My old self did that. That's great. And now I do things a bit differently. And that's great.
I love that way of looking at it. I'm going to totally seize on that, like the idea of like, well, at the time I was very fashionable in those, denim overalls or whatever.
I'm going to stick to that, even though everybody at the time was even looking at me. I'm not going to remember that.
I'm going to be like, I was like their little time capsules of what I was in my life. So I'm grateful for them because I can go back to every book and know exactly what was going on with me. Like when I was writing my book, Lock and Key, I was trying desperately to get pregnant. Then I got pregnant. Then I had a miscarriage, which was like devastating. And then I got pregnant again, And so I have this sort of pregnancy, sideline in there that ends up in a positive way. But I can go back and see the story that was going on between the lines with me. So it's a nice way of kind of reaching back and remembering.
It's like a diary.
Yeah. But only you can read it. Only you can see it, It's like
see what it was.
Yes. All right. I'm going to look at another question. I'm going to find us another question. Hold on. Let's see.
There's one from Molly Holloman.
Okay. I couldn't. Wait. Well, I see a different. Okay. I read both books this summer for a YA book club.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank you, Molly. And the month's theme was, is there a new normal? Was it your intention to use characters like Audrey and Sydney to help teens feel more secure? Do you have any book characters that did the same for you as a teen? Well, I will say I grew up reading a lot of Judy Blume, and I think Judy Blume.
Absolutely.
Yes, I mean we are of a certain generation, but Judy Blume to me, she wrote about things that nobody else was writing about, and her characters were feeling things that I thought I was the only person in the world that felt like about your body or about boys or. So that definitely resonated with me. I feel like a lot of people, our generation, feel that way about her.
Yeah.
Was there somebody else that?
She had the voice that spoke to us. I read a book. It's a very old-fashioned book called 15 by Beverly Cleary.
I read that book too. I loved that book.
I loved it. I read that about 1,000 times.
Right.
It was very comforting, and it was quite tame because it was of its time. But the insecurities and the worries and the kind of the parents, I just loved the way it was quite understated. I loved that book.
I did too. I remember reading that book when I was a teenager, and I think that I felt the same way about YA. Like I just wanted to read books about people that were going through the things that I was going through. I can't believe you mentioned 15. I haven't thought about that book in years, but
I found my old copy. And I was like,
oh my gosh,
I'm reading this now.
Yeah, I think going back and reading it would be interesting. I went back and read Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret years ago, and I was like, wow, this is a totally different book than I remember. I mean, it's just, but the shock value of it is so much different now. But people are still trying to ban Judy Blume. She's fabulous. I think the greatest compliment I get is that, when people say this is like my story, or this is like my friends, this is my school or whatever, then you know that you've kind of resonated with somebody in that same way. It's really, it's the highest compliment for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree. Actually, it's that kind of you must have read my mind.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's such a good thing. Okay, I'm gonna hit you with one more question. Let's see.
Let's see.
Okay.
Okay,
so here's
maths. Because I can't do maths.
No, okay, no maths. Okay, there's a question about somebody saying that they have started so many books, but they can't finish them because they don't like the storyline or got writer's block. Do you have any advice to help get past this or get back into it rather than starting all over again?
Well, I will tell you that, I don't know if this is your experience, every single book I have ever written in my whole life, which is now quite a number, at some point during the book, I think, this is a stupid idea, I hate this book, I hate the characters, why did I ever think of this? What about this other bright, shiny idea? That's going to be easier, I'll do that. And a couple of times I have actually abandoned a work in progress and started on the bright, new, shiny idea. And you know what? Then that turns into a difficult idea.
Exactly.
So that never works. And you always hate your book at some stage. You hate your book. You hate everything. You hate writing. Why did you ever take up this stupid profession? So you just have the confidence to know that is going to happen and just never mind. Roll with it.
Yeah. Push through.
Get to the end.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like writing a book for me is like sort of like falling in love. I married somebody that I met when I was a teenager, but the first like 75 pages are always fabulous because they're just brand new and it's shiny and everything's still perfect. And then from about 75 to about 375 is just murder, and really, really hard. And then 375 to like 425 is great because you're at the end and it's the top of the roller coaster and you can see what's happening. So, but that middle stretch, it's kind of like you're falling in love and then, this person's okay, so maybe they're not perfect, but I still like them. And then you hit that make or break point where it's like we're either going to make it or we're not. We're either going to dig in our heels and keep going or we're going to separate. And there have been a few books, but every book that has been good, I've had that moment where I've hated the book and I've hated myself. And, I think it's just part of
it. Do you plan? And I'm addressing this to the person who asked the question, because if you know where you're heading, maybe that's what you need. You need a bit of structure that you're looking.
Yeah.
And the other thing is to have scenes way ahead in the book that you are looking forward to writing. You can't wait to get to that scene, that denouement or that confrontation. That's going to be so cool to write, and that gives you something to look forward to, like signposts, rather than just, oh, I have to take a story forward. How am I going to do that?
Right.
That can be intimidating.
Yeah. And how much do you plan is what I'm curious about. Do you outline? Do you have the whole idea before you start? Or do you just...
The more I've done it, the more I plan, actually.
Okay.
I plan, and I spend weeks, months planning.
Mm-hmm.
Then I start, and I really think I know where I'm going. Then I change my mind. So, you know. And I have, my new way of planning is I have file cards, which I blue tack onto the wall with all the plot points, and then I sort of stand back and I can see the whole book on a wall, which is just great, and then I can move it all around. And then, you know, of course it changes as you go along, but for me, I like to have an idea before I start. Mind you, I have friends who write novels who sit down and they have no idea. They just, it's a magical mystery tour. So everyone's different. But if you are getting so far and not being able to move on, perhaps you do need to outline a bit first.
Yeah. And what I do, I can't outline because I am such a rule follower that if I outline, I'll feel like I can't, you know, vary from it at all. So I don't start until I have what I call my skeleton, which is like first scene, climactic scene, last scene, first line. So that way you have a sense of where you're going. Like it's not like you're just getting in the car and driving aimlessly. Like you have a destination. But if something cool comes up on the side of the road and you want to pull over and check it out, you know, you can. But all the books that haven't worked, I haven't really had that. I've sort of had sort of this, that, and then I just peter out in the middle, and you know. So I'm always interested in that because I think I'm always desperate to know how other people do it, because even though I've published 12 books, I still feel like everyone is terrible.
Well, there's no rule for that, and no one teaches you. You just kind of make it up as you go along. You just learn from each book and just kind of wing it, really.
Yeah.
Oh, I had a question pop up. Okay.
Oh, no, I think I saw it. I think this is our last one. So, okay. The question is about rejection.
Oh, no.
I know, what a sad note. We'll have to add one more after this. But how do you deal? Because I think it's interesting that people think once you have published a book and you have an agent and stuff that you no longer deal with rejection or criticism or people, and that is not true. At least it hasn't been in my experience. It's like, if anything, the stakes are higher in a lot of ways. Like with every book.
The pressure gets higher.
Yeah. How do you deal with the pressure, I guess, is the question I, you know, am interested in.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. In the question, I can see, you know, when people don't like your book, and I mean that happens to us all.
Right.
Of course, no one's going to write, you know, books that everybody in the world likes.
Right.
And I think that the first time you get criticism, it just is this blow to your heart.
Right.
And I think that the blow to the heart stays, but I think you get more perspective over the years. And I think what I've learned is that you can't expect everybody in the world to like what you do. Right. You can't expect everybody to love each book as much as the other book. So they will say, oh, well, I didn't like this one as much as that one. And you'll think, oh, no, you know, what was wrong with it? And then after, you know, years and years, I've learned that everybody has their own favorite. You know, I'll go to signings and everybody will say, I like this one, that one. And I think, well, okay, everyone's just got different opinions, and some people hate what I do, and that's fine. And I think you just have to kind of just believe in what you do and know that you tried as hard as you can. And that's my thing. I will honestly say I try as hard as I can with each book, and I never rest on my laurels. Yeah. And I'm always trying to improve. And you know what more can you do than that, really?
You can't. And if you listen to the criticism, like I was getting a lot of criticism a few books ago saying, oh, you always write the same book. You have too much of a formula. You know, so I tried to do something a little bit different, and everyone was like, it's not like the other ones, you know, and I really learned from that, like, okay, you know, I need to write the book of my heart, and your best is good enough. You put everything into it, and then you move on to the next one. It's like what you were talking about, not everyone is going to like it. Meg Cabot has this great quote that I steal all the time, but I do attribute it to her. She says her dad used to say, you're not $100 bill, not everyone is going to love you. You know, it's like nobody is $100 bill, so it's okay, you know, and I would rather write books that I'm proud of and that I feel good about than, you know, try to please everybody, because it doesn't work. That doesn't work in life. It doesn't work in writing. It doesn't work in anything, you know. No. I'm finally learning that in my 40s, you know.
Yeah, it takes a while. Yeah. We'll get there.
Okay, so they're suggesting we do one more fun question. So the question is, what is your own favorite book? Not that you've written, or it could be one that you've written, but like...
Oh, yeah, I'll choose one of my own, obviously.
Yeah.
Because all the other books are really quite inferior, so... Oh, I'm so rubbish at this question. I mean, I have answers for it. You know, I always say a Jane Austen, a Pride and Prejudice, maybe Emma. I flit between the two. The honest truth is my favorite book changes daily.
Yep.
You know, I'm very fickle. I just love, you know, whatever I'm reading. I'm rereading Brideshead Revisited at the moment.
Oh, wow.
By Evelyn Waugh. I'm loving it, you know, and I sort of slightly fall in love with each book that I really get into.
Right.
And then I'm on to the next one. So, but, you know, of course I have my favorites. And Jane Austen is, you know, the queen. So
I always say that A Prayer for Owen Meany by John Irving is my favorite book, like, of all books. But I'm like you. I always like, my favorite book I've read recently is Station 11, which was amazing and totally not. I thought it was amazing because it totally is not my kind of book. The sort of dystopian. It was incredible. So, and I'm always reading. I usually have like a book on my iPad. I have a book, or hardcover book I'm reading, and I'm listening to audio in the car. So it's just like constant, you know.
Books.
Books. I know. It makes me happy, especially when I'm not writing. That's what I'm doing. Is I'm trying to read other people's good books.
Do you? I have one tiny.
Go ahead.
Of my own. Which do you read other people's books when you're writing your own book?
I don't read YA when I'm writing my own books. I just read everything else. I read a lot of nonfiction. I read a lot of contemporary. I can't read YA when I'm writing YA. No. So I've been reading a lot of YA during this break, which has been great. But I just can't. I don't want to know what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, I agree. I'm the same. I read nothing because it gets in my head. I'm quite a parrot.
Yeah.
I pick other people's voices up really easily.
Yeah.
And then I start writing like them, and that's no good.
And that's no good. So, and it can be unconscious. It's not like you're consciously trying to.
Oh, no, it's completely unconscious.
I read a lot of magazines and a lot of nonfiction when I'm, and you know.
Yeah. I watch a lot of telly.
I watch a lot of telly. I feel like you and I would be like best friends if we lived close to each other. We would have cocktails and watch television and just be really.
Yeah, we could be writing partners.
I could be writing partners and drinking partners. And it would be good. We'll have to get, someday we will meet. I really hope so.
Will. I really hope so. This has been amazing, actually. It's been so much fun. It's been
this has been the next best thing to meeting in person. So.
No, exactly. No, I feel like we did meet in person. I feel like, you know, there you are.
There we are. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I'm sorry we didn't get to all the questions. We were too busy gabbing with each other.
We were naughty. Sorry, we chatted too much, but I hope that it was interesting and informative.
I hope so, too. All right, well, I guess we can sign off. And thank you, Sophie. It was so nice talking to you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Okay. Bye. Bye.